In this episode, we will be focusing on swallows. Swallows are a family of passerine songbirds that appear around the world. In the world, there are about 90 species of swallows. Swallows are iconically known for their long, pointed wings, streamlined bodies, and often forked tails, which make them masters of flight. Swallows are aerial insectivores. Aerial insectivores use their flight to feed on flying insects as their primary source of food. Here in Alberta, we have 7 different species of swallow: the tree swallow, cliff swallow, barn swallow, northern ruffed-winged swallow, bank swallow, violet-green swallow, and purple martin. Different species of swallows like to nest in different ways. The purple martins like to nest in apartment-style nest boxes, and you'll often see them up on a pole. Tree swallows you'll often find throughout the province perched on fence posts close to their nest boxes, and they'll also sometimes nest in tree cavities. Cliff swallows, on the other hand, like to build their own nests, and you'll find these nests under bridges throughout the province and on the sides of cliffs. Barn swallows build their nests on any kind of human-made structures, often old buildings and barns.
When I was completing my grassland breeding bird internship at Beaverhill Bird Observatory, there was always this part where I would reach the opening where the tree swallow nest boxes are, and it was my favorite part of the surveys. I loved seeing them sitting on their nest boxes with their beautiful blue-green iridescent color, and I also really love when they stick their head out of the nest box just to check out what's going on. I find that really, really cute. And they were also so small but so fierce. So when I'd start to move through the area, they would start to get suspicious, and then they would start to actually dive at my head while I was doing my form. So I always tried to be respectful and move quickly to not disturb them. And one day I remember that there was this hawk flying by, and so many of the tree swallows just flew up and surrounded the hawk. And I thought it was amazing that they're so small, but together they're so fierce, and that hawk was just out of there. So because of that experience, they really landed a special place in my heart as one of my favorite birds.
Geoff Holroyd, the chair of Beaverhill Bird Observatory, shares about his PhD on tree swallows and discusses what got him interested into nature in the first place.
At a very young age, I was raised in a small town in central England, and always remember exploring the oak woods that were around our little village. And then when I was 7 or 8 years old, I contracted tuberculosis and ended up in hospital with major surgery on my neck to remove infected glands. And I remember sitting there watching an English robin flying back and forth in the garden. I suspect in retrospect it was gathering food and feeding young, but I got really curious about birds. And I remember an uncle taking me out bird watching. I moved to Canada when I was 10 and still have bird books that I bought, before I was 10 from England. So I've just always been interested in birds from a very young age and kept that interest. And then as a 14-year-old, I contacted the Ontario Bird Banding Association, who took me to Long Point Bird Observatory, and I banded my first birds. And I just got hooked and decided the people I was hanging around with were all academics. And I decided as a teenager I was going to get a PhD and study birds all my life. And I now joke that I'm still the teenager living his dream. The tree swallow research really dates back to my graduate work at Long Point. And I just became obsessed almost with putting up tree swallow boxes wherever I had a chance to put them up. And then when I moved to Edmonton and first went out to Beaverhill, even that spring, I actually went home, built bird boxes, and put them out along the lakeshore, just on trees at that point. And then a couple of years later, a graduate student Peter Dunn approached us about doing a part of his PhD studying the swallows out there. So he actually organized the swallow boxes onto posts into the configurations there now, and then also put some at the edge of the woodland to the south, and then along the road heading into Towfield. And part of his study was looking at the differences in the number of young eggs and young as one went further away from the lake, and not too surprisingly, the further away from the lake, the fewer eggs and young that the birds have. So the tree swallows, so their primary food are midges, which are the larval form are aquatic, so they come out of the lake in vast swarms, and the swallows take advantage of that and feed on them. So the further from the lake, then the fewer the eggs and young that they have. But also the point of putting boxes up and monitoring them over time is to look for change. So we always look out the window and think, oh, what we see is constant forever. But when you get older, you start to realize the only constant is change. The question is, how much is it changing, and what's causing those changes? We're finding a 25% reduction in the number of swallows. So the swallows that do turn up are productive, but not as many are turning up. So that means we have to look elsewhere for what could be causing that decline. And the decline is not just at Beaverhill, but it's actually across North America, where the number of swallows are declining. And as probably the most likely cause are neonicotinoids, the insecticide that is used on agricultural crops to reduce insect damage. But at the same time, it's not just specific to particular insects, it kills all insects. And it's actually most abundant in the waters in the spring before a farmer puts his crop in the field. So the neonicotinoids that are in the soils wash into the wetlands in the spring with the melting snow, and that actually then kills even more insects in the wetland, even though the wetlands are not being sprayed. So there's a whole ecological cascading effect that's happening because of neonicotinoids, and we need to look seriously at their use, but we partly know that because of the declines of aerial insectivores, and in the context of Beaverhill, we know the lakes come back, they're producing more eggs and young, but if they don't have food the rest of the year, then they're not going to survive and come back. So really the swallows have taught us a lot about the whole ecology of the area and given us a story to tell in the context of North America. The surprising part of my PhD research was the way that swallows and kingbirds separate out the insects and eat different insects. So when I started, my supervisor took me to talk to the head of entomology at the University of Toronto, and I wanted to be able to sample what insects were available for the swallows. And he told me not to bother, that whatever the swallows ate, that's what was there. They would all eat the same thing. And it turns out they don't. Each species has a specific diet that can be related to the sort of micromorphology of the swallows. So each swallow has subtle differences, and that's reflected in the foods, the insects that they catch. So they're not just like an insect gnat that gets whatever's available. They're actually selecting what's optimum for their size and their flight abilities. So the tree swallows in particular were honed in on large midges. So again, there's not just one species of midge, there are others. The bank swallows tended to home in on the smaller midges. So they would take big midges if they were super abundant, but if they weren't abundant, then they very quickly switched over to the smaller midges, which were abundant but less efficient for the tree swallow to eat because the tree swallow is bigger, right? So they don't want to feed on small food if there's bigger food available. So, and then barn swallows, which fly faster, are able to get faster flying flies. So house flies, deer flies, that's sort of what we think of as typically a big fly. That's the primary food of a barn swallow. And the purple martin, which is another species that was there nesting in artificial cavities, houses at Long Point, they eat even bigger insects. So they're going after moths, butterflies, dragonflies, insects that have got more value for them and they're a bigger bird, so they need bigger food items to raise their young and sustain themselves. So each species was eating different kinds of insects, and I could relate that to the size and flying abilities of the swallows.
Purple martins are common in the Edmonton area, often first arriving to the province in early May. Purple martins almost exclusively rely on artificial nest sites provided by humans, so our role in their conservation is important. One of the incredible things about purple martins is that they make great neighbors, and they'll often return to the same nesting sites every year. When these birds find a suitable nesting area, they begin forming pairs. Purple martins are cavity nesters, building their nests out of mud, straw, fresh leaves, and pine needles that they collect. After about 2 to 3 weeks, purple martin eggs will hatch, and it will take the babies about a month to be strong enough to fledge and leave the nest. The babies will start out pink before growing their feathers. After the breeding season is over at the end of summer, purple martins will gather and form roosts. A roost is when birds gather in large flocks to feed, socialize, and rest together before they migrate to South America. Many swallow roosts can number in the thousands. Swallows can migrate long distances and can even fly up to 30 miles per hour. Amazingly, these flocks can even be seen on the weather radar. Aerial insectivores are declining worldwide due to habitat loss and reduced availability of their food. Pesticides also sadly can lead to deformities among our swallows. Extreme temperatures can also impact the availability of certain insects. For example, during cold snaps, the availability of flying insects can drop drastically, meaning swallows like purple martins can starve. Purple martins will huddle together as a way to stay warm. On the flip side, heat waves can put nestlings at risk of overheating. Overall, we know these issues are complex, but it seems that climate change and pesticides are contributing to fewer prey populations that these birds rely on to survive. Supporting and protecting areas with habitats for swallows, putting up nest boxes, and reducing pesticide use are some ways that we can help conserve aerial insectivores. I've been fortunate to see different species of swallows in the Edmonton River Valley. Many parks and areas in the Edmonton area are home to different swallows in the spring, so keep your eye out for them. Today we discussed several swallow species that live in Alberta. We focused on learning more about tree swallows and purple martins. I hope you learned something new about swallows and why protecting our aerial insectivores is so important.